Goeiemorgen! Good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. And you know, in the last video I had with Peter Crutchley, who worked in a very high position in South African Airways, I talked about how a small world we live in, thanks to the internet. And yeah, I've just been corrected with my sign at the back. It should be -8 hours, and that will be fixed very shortly. Thank you very, very much, Colin, for telling me. Now, I have got Colin Weir here with me today. And, you know, it's amazing the coincidences that are happening on this channel. It's almost like someone is steering us in a certain direction. And Colin was very involved in flying. In fact, he was involved with the South African Air Force, and he's got an amazing history, an amazing story to tell. But just to start off with, Colin, tell us your background in South Africa, leading up to a young man and going all the way to the time where you were involved with South African Airways.
Thanks, Scott. I was originally born in Pretoria in South Africa, went through schooling, CBC and Waterkloof House Preparatory School in Pretoria. Eventually started working and joined the South African Air Force as an Air Force pilot. I had a total of 16 years in the Air Force, 9 years on the fighter line, flying the Macchi or the Impala aircraft in the Angolan conflict. At the same time, we had a charter company. We were involved in commercial flying, and through that process got involved in auditing. Ended up with a lot of work with the legal side of aviation, where the lawyers would call us in to do investigations post-accident. And we had 2 accidents in South Africa, one at Rand Airport, one in Mozambique, with 9 or 10 people killed in the one, 2 in the other. The lawyers called us in and we started investigating.
Before we go there,
yes.
Before we go there, your move from flying for the Air Force to South African Airways, there must have been a transition. Tell us about that.
Yes, well, the South African Air Force was a full-time occupation that then became a citizen force involvement where, if you remember...
What year was this?
This was 1968. I was on pupil pilot's course.
Yeah.
And then I was on a short-term commission for 5 years, and then during that period moved across into citizen force, which was the part-time involvement. So that was around about 68, 75, and then around about 1975, 76 went into the citizen force.
Right.
As a part-time pilot, being called up at random intervals for the Angolan conflict.
Okay. And when was your first involvement with South African Airways? About what time period?
The involvement that I had with them was when we were involved in this pilot license scam, and we uncovered the fraudulent activity. Okay.
Now just talking about that, before we actually go into this pilot license scam, which is incredibly disturbing, you were in a position where you had to flee the country under police guard once that was exposed, weren't you?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, can you tell us your story related to, and go into some detail, spend a few minutes talking about how this unfolded?
Well, when we got involved in the pilot license scam, we discovered that it went into the Civil Aviation Authority offices, and we discovered that it was known up to the highest level, with the Commissioner for Civil Aviation was aware of it. And what then happened was...
So you're saying that the guy right at the top knew that there were scam pilot licenses being handed out?
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
And that was obviously a BEE appointee.
Well, this was much later on. This was in the year 1999
Yeah.
because we left in 2000 to come back to Australia.
So basically, it was under the ANC government all this was going on.
Yes,
Okay.
it was. It was long after Mandela was
Yeah.
released in 1984.
Okay. So please continue with your story.
So when we uncovered all of this, the lawyers who had contracted me in to analyze everything then arranged a meeting with the civil aviation in Pretoria, with their full legal team and their heads of departments. And I went into the lawyers and everything was laid on the table and they were given 7 days to respond.
Yeah.
At which they responded, but it was inadequate in terms of the explanation. So it was then taken down to the public prosecutor's office, who then issued a warrant for his arrest. And he was arrested and he was put in jail. However, we thought it would be a long-term incarceration, but it ended up with 3 days.
So who was actually arrested, just so we're clear?
The Commissioner for Civil Aviation.
The Commissioner for Civil Aviation was put in jail because he was involved in the creation of fake pilot licenses.
That's correct.
Wow. And this is 1999.
1999, we came back to Australia in 2000, yes.
Right, okay. And did that involve pilot licenses for South African Airways?
There were three South African Airways pilots implicated. There was an Anglo-American pilot, there was South African Police Air Wing, and various others. We were able to identify about 15 that had the licenses, but there were a lot more that were actually not identified as time went on, but there were at least 15 that were identified.
Wow, that is extraordinary. And why hasn't your story ever been told?
Well, if you go online and you do a search on, Colin Ware and the Commissioner for Civil Aviation,
Yeah.
it's all on there. It was on Carte Blanche, where we were interviewed as well. So there's a long history, recorded history. Some of it's been taken off the system, but a lot of it's been left on there. So it's identifiable. The issue was that it never went to a full trial, although it went to a couple of preliminary hearings,
Yeah.
Including the arbitration committee or the arbitration board, whatever it was called. But eventually it all just petered out, as these things do.
Wow. So in other words, no one's actually charged.
No, that's correct. But
what about the guys with the fake pilot licenses? Didn't they spend any time?
Well, the interesting thing is that 3 of them that were identified that were going to be brought into the preliminary hearings, one of them ran away into Africa somewhere, was never heard of again. One of the other 2, the one guy was caught at Cape Town airport with a suitcase full of cocaine or heroin, and I believe he was jailed.
Wow.
I believe the other one was caught at the Canadian-USA border, trying to get through the border, and they had identified him through the caves in Afghanistan, where the American forces have got in and looked at paperwork and identified a few people. He was one of them, and we heard, it might be hearsay, but we heard that he was arrested on the Canadian-USA border.
So do you know if he was deported back to South Africa?
No, that was the last that we heard of what happened there.
Okay, so what we're actually saying is that there were 3 South African Airways pilots flying commercial planes in South Africa who had fake pilot licenses.
That is correct. And that is recorded through all the investigations and the systems back there at the time.
Now, would you fly South African Airways today?
Well, I'll tell you what happened at the time, because when we were put under police protection, and we were driven out to, at that point, Johannesburg International Oliver Tambo Airport in a police convoy. There were about 24 policemen, 4 or 5 vehicles. We all went out in a protective convoy, went to the airport, arrived there to find that the Qantas flight we were booked on was not going to fly because the crew were out of flight and duty time. They therefore switched us onto a South African Airways flight, and told us we were going to fly South African Airways, and we refused to fly on it. So we spent a night at the airport under police protection until the Qantas flight took off the next day. And at the time, we refused to fly with it because there had been rumors, and it might just be rumors, that South African Airways were using bogus parts on their aircraft. So that was one of the things that we were going to investigate before the whole thing went bad, and we left. But the main reason, of course, was that the security on the South African Airways flight, we weren't 100% sure that it was going to be of a level that I could protect my family, wife and 3 children.
Well, I can totally understand that. And just to be clear, why were you under police protection? Had you had death threats?
What happened was that when we uncovered all of this and the commissioner was put in jail and then he was let out, we knew that we were going to be in terrible trouble. And there were 2 of us investigating. The one was the other gentleman was a ex-police helicopter pilot whose son had died in the accident in Mozambique.
Right.
And he had gone to Mozambique and actually found the wreck, found his son, try to get him back, and there were all sorts of issues with that. The civil aviation in South Africa wouldn't pay to have him brought back, and eventually he brought him back under his own cost or at his own cost. And then when the situation then developed that the commissioner was let out of jail, we realized that we were now under severe threat. And first of all, there were incidents with the other gentleman with issues with where he lived and threats and being followed, his daughter being followed home from work.
Wow.
And then there was a kidnap attempt on my children at their school in Pretoria.
What? Was this during this time?
Yes. This was right at the very end when we were about to leave. And I got my passports, money, and everything. And 6 guys in a ute or a bakkie, as it's called over there, came into the school. And I'd just got out of the car to go and say goodbye to the teachers because we were due to fly out in a day or 2. And the girls were sitting in the car, but there were 2 boom gates and it was a secure area.
Right.
And when I walked into and said goodbye, as I walked out, the children came running, screaming, and said that these guys had tried to take the car and take them in the car. And they slashed the tires of the car. And as they drove out to get to the boom gates, I ran to the boom gate because I was armed as everybody is.
Yeah.
And I tried to intercept them. And they just opened the boom gate. And the second boom gate, the same thing happened. And it was all obviously pre-planned. And in retrospect, it was lucky I didn't get to them because apparently there were 6 of them and they were all armed and some of them had AK-47. So it was a very difficult situation.
Do you know who actually organized that attempted killing or assassination?
No, but the lawyers that we'd been dealing with then had an incident shortly thereafter where their child where the child of one of the lawyers at one of the schools in Johannesburg, there was an attempt to in fact, kidnap the child because some guy came in and tried to get this child to get in the car with him. And the teacher saw what was going on and put a stop to it. And then also their home, some guys arrived at the house and threatened the servant and so on and so forth. So there were all sorts of issues going on at the time.
So that's why you had a police guard when you left South Africa?
Yes, so because we were all on Australian passports, the Australian embassy and the South African police, so we were put under police protection.
Right.
We had about 12 special force elite police members looking after us and the family. We lived in Silver Lakes. And even in Silver Lakes, we had them in the house, around the house for about 3 or 4 days until they issued emergency travel documents. And then and then we left. But that leads into the Helderberg side of things as well.
Right. And when you say the Hildeberg thing?
Well, when the commissioner was arrested,
What is his name?
Trevor Abrams.
Trevor Abrams was the commissioner, and he was involved
he,
in the illegal pilot licenses. Okay.
Yes, and he's now head of the firebombing, fixed wing and rotary firebombing.
What, right now in South Africa?
Right now in South Africa, and I went over for a 50-year reunion to Hermanus about 3 months ago. And one of my pupil pilots who was with me as a pupil pilot, Hendrik Marais, B.S. Marais, died in that helicopter accident about 3 years ago in that Cape Town, those big fires in Cape Town.
Right.
And they had a catastrophic failure of the helicopter. And if you look on Carte Blanche, there was an interview with Trevor Abrams on Carte Blanche asking him about the maintenance on these aircraft and about the issue of buying parts for the helicopters down at the local hardware shop.
No, seriously. Now, if you were going to be traveling to South Africa or anywhere in the world, would you buy a South African Airways flight?
I would only use them as an absolute last resort, because not only the situation, they're in such a dire financial situation, because we're very involved in auditing around the world, airlines and helicopter operations and the rest, and accident investigations. We know that when the pressure's on with money, the first thing that is affected is maintenance.
Yeah.
And the safety levels go down. So we're very, very aware of that. So I would avoid them at all costs. Not only that, but also the service and everything that goes hand in hand with it.
Yeah, because I have to tell you, when I was living in South Africa, and this is the 1980s, South African Airways was the safest airline in the world.
Yes.
It had that reputation. There were no deaths. No one had ever died on a plane. And now what you're saying to us here, as someone who was involved in the investigation, so it's not secondhand, this is first-hand information, that back in 1999, 3 pilots flying commercial flights for South African Airways had fake pilot licenses. Is that correct?
At least 3, but there were, we knew there were a lot more than that.
Wow. And do you think that would have deteriorated in more recent years, or have they got that under control now?
No, the problem is that with a civil aviation authority that's in disarray, which they are, it's a major issue, because it goes across the board in terms of safety and controls for the aviation. So there are a lot of issues over there with the civil aviation and safety in the current situation.
You know, I'm going to say something which is just, it's just standing out like the proverbial, and that is that what you've got is a group of people coming in and taking management roles in a technology they have no understanding of. And that, if you look at what's happening to Eskom today, what you're talking about here in South African Airways, what's happening in the municipalities in South Africa, no water, no sewerage, you know, all this sort of stuff that's going on. It's clear that they don't have the competency to actually manage these things. And where South Africa is going, it's going back to pre-1652, where they're going to go and live in little mud huts, and they're going to be driving their cattle around with sticks. I mean, that's what it's going back to.
That's exactly why I made contact with you, because as I said, I'm very worried about the situation, obviously from a more self-centered point of view with family, but
yeah,
I mean, the whole social system has collapsed in a heap. There's no rule of law.
Yeah,
and when you look at the farm situation, that it is horrific. And the issue is how to expose this so they can get help.
You know what? they have an Ironman competition starting in less than an hour in Durban, where the Ironman, their first leg is to swim in the sea for 1.9 kilometers, where just a couple of weeks ago you had that sewage pouring into the harbor and flowing out into the beaches. I mean, no, if you go to the Ironman website, there is absolutely no reference to the issues they've been having. Now, you could have people sucking in E. coli and all sorts of stuff because it's got to be there. I mean, this is so fresh, and yet there's no concern. It's just, let's take the money and run. That seems to be the attitude of these guys.
No, it is a very, very serious situation, and I travel over there at regular intervals, because we're operating over there as well, and it's
Right.
it's a very worrying situation.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, it's been very interesting to hear your story, and I'll be putting this up on the Loving Life channel shortly. Is there anything else you'd like to add or say to the thousands of subscribers who follow the channel?
Well, the other side of things is that the Helderberg accident is also another major issue, but maybe that could be left for a separate one because it's another section all on its own.
Well, let's talk about it. What was that about?
Well, the issue was that when all of this issue was going on with the pilot license scam, Mickey Mitchell, who was an ex-director of operations at SAA, was a partner of mine.
Yeah.
And we knew that he was involved, and he was involved the night the Helderberg radioed in to say that they had a fire on board.
Yeah.
And should they continue, or what they should do, because they had to divert. Mm-hmm. And we know that the directive was given from the op center at South African Airways for the Helderberg to continue flying, even though it had had this onboard fire. And the reason why it was they were told to carry on and continue and fly back was because we now know, obviously, that they had on board military grade chemicals that were unstable, that if they had diverted and they'd found these chemicals, it would have compromised the whole political situation in South Africa. So they were told to continue with the flight. And of course, the next thing that happened was that the fire initiated again, and the accident happened, and the Helderberg was lost with, I don't know how many lives, 230 lives or so.
Wow. So it was a commercial flight, was it?
It was a South African Airways 747 commercial flight with freight.
Flying from where to where?
I think it was Bangkok to Mauritius and then South Africa, or they were diverting to Mauritius when they had the problem.
Wow. And what was the stuff that they had on board, which was
the one substance that was mentioned was some sort of peroxide, sodium peroxide or something, but also red mercuric oxide, which is what was used in the rockets as igniter and a propellant for the rockets that were used in Angola, the 68 mil rockets.
Okay. And what would they be wanting that for?
Well, they used it in our weaponry while the Angolan war was on the go.
Oh, I see. But
so,
are we talking post 1994? Or are we talking way before?
No, we're talking now pre 1994.
Yeah.
When the Angolan war was going on.
So we're talking about the era when the National Party government were in power.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Right. Okay. Wow. And obviously that's been kind of covered up as well.
Well, Justice Margot, who ran the investigation, he died.
Yeah.
Mickey Mitchell has also died.
Yeah.
There was one of the pilots in the ops room that night. He also died, I believe, in mysterious circumstances. But when this pilot license scam was on the go, the tapes that were recorded that night that were critical had been put into the commissioner's safe in Pretoria.
This is the guy who landed up in jail.
Yes, and the Scorpions, I think they were called, the Scorpions, that elite police unit went
Yeah.
to his office and got the safe open, and the tapes were gone,
Wow.
which is very, very unfortunate, because that would have explained the whole thing. And that's why those tapes were such a sensitive issue.
Yeah.
And subsequent to that, they've gone. So what
So,
happened was,
so now, with that previous thing with the chemicals, we're talking about something that happened in the era of the National Party back in the 1980s. And now we're back to talking about what happened post 1994 with the fake
that's
pilot
correct.
licenses. Okay, yeah.
Yes,
I'm just trying to get
yes.
the timelines right here. Okay, yeah,
So that was all wrapped up in the same thing. But then, of course,
yeah,
that led to the tapes being lost, as it were. And then Mickey Mitchell later on, then when he left South African Airways, he went to Mauritius for 5 years as a post retirement exercise. Then he joined me,
yeah,
and so then it all came out, and I had many discussions with him concerning this issue with the tapes. And one day I said to him, I said, Mickey, why don't you, if you know more about this, why don't you just let everybody know for the sake of the families?
yeah.
And he just looked at me and he said, Colin, don't even go there. Don't talk about it. Forget about it. I advise you not to go near there. And that's how he left it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Look, this has been a fascinating discussion, and I guess the bottom line of what we're talking about, if we're talking about right now, at this moment in time, South African Airways, the planes are basically stuck together with ticky-tack, and you never know if the pilot actually has a real license.
Well, they've probably solved those problems, to be quite honest, since those days in terms of the crewing. Although, of course, the pilot license skill sets are probably not on a par with other leading airlines like Emirates and Singapore and so on and so forth.
And Qantas.
And Qantas. And as far as the maintenance is concerned, I don't know what the status is at the moment, but the situation with cost
Yeah,
is very
they're
worrying.
bankrupt.
That's right.
Wow. Look, this has been a fantastic and fascinating discussion. I'm really pleased you shared it with this channel. What I will do is I will put you in direct touch with Peter.
Yes, good.
Peter is probably going to be involved in another project on this community channel. And
Good.
I've had an interview with him earlier today, and this is why I say it's incredible that these coincidences keep happening, and it's just quite amazing. And yeah, look, I'm sure that you and Peter will have a lot to talk about.
No, it'll be very interesting. I look forward to talking to him. Where does he live, by the way, Scott?
He's in New Zealand.
Okay.
Now,
Well, we work over there too. Yes.
yeah. Do you have family in South Africa? You do have family in South Africa still. Do you,
Yes, I have a brother and a sister, and of course, all of their daughters and sons and their children and grandchildren. So we've got quite a large family group still over there.
do you want to send them a message while we're just here chatting?
Well, to Wendy and John, I would just like to say I hope everything's okay there, and we're doing our best over here to help the situation, and let's hope it works out favorably in the long run.
All right, fantastic. All right, look, we'll certainly be keeping in touch. I'm going to, with your permission, forward your email to Peter.
Yes, please do.
And what you guys can do is you can email direct between yourselves, and obviously exchange Skype or whatever. And well, you've both got Zoom now, so you can both get on Zoom and chat like we have been here.
No, that's a very useful program, and I'll definitely keep it on all the computers we got here. Yeah,
that's
and when I travel.
As I say, you can record the conversation in real time, which is fantastic.
Yeah, no, that's very good.
All right, Colin, lovely speaking to you. And
All right, Scott.
I'll be putting this video up shortly, and I'll send you the link so you can go and have a look.
No, that's good. And it won't have any surnames or anything like that. It'll just be the background to all of that, which
Yeah,
is which.
only what we've talked about. That's it.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Yeah, I
That's
mean
good.
the only guy who's been dubbed in here is that commissioner.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, buddy. Lovely chatting to you.
Go
Okay,
well, eh?
take care.
Bye.
Bye for now.
Bye.